What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Other Side of the Firewall podcast, where we talk about the latest and greatest of cybersecurity news, as well as we highlight those movers and shakers and glass ceiling breakers, those people of color who've made it to the other side of the proverbial firewall. My name is Ryan Williams, and as always, I'm joined by Shannon.
What's up? What's up?
What's going on? So if you have not tuned in last week, please go ahead and go back, right? So we're nearing 500 episodes, but a lot of the content is timeless, right? So Monday, Tuesday are topics, Wednesday's discussion, and then Monday, Tuesday topics, Wednesday discussion, Thursday's a throwback. So please go back and check that one out. And then Friday's everything else, movies, books, games, all that good stuff. Without further ado, I give it to Shannon.
All right, everybody. So this article actually comes from dataprotectionreport.com. And the title of this one, actually, it's written by David Kessler and Susan Ross. And the title of this one is NYDFS finalizes cybersecurity rule amendment. So the NYDFS is the New York Department of Financial Services, right? So they had an amendment to their cybersecurity regulations, which requires them to report incidents within a certain amount of time, right? So we've talked about this before. We know the federal government has looked into this as well, right? Like if there's any type of incident that affects, anyone that's working with the DoD or any of the, the three-letter organizations, they want to make it to where you're reporting it in a certain amount of time. And New York State has done the same thing, right? So now they put a 72-hour notification requirement for these situations, and the service provider has to report the cybersecurity incident and has to give notice to other government agencies as well, right? So anyone that may be a government agency that's operating within New York State. So it's a good thing, right? Because we talked about this before about, and this is probably one of those things where when we talked about it before, it was more along the lines of companies, right? Like companies that are in it to make money that don't do these things because it can cost them money, right? But this is New York State saying, okay, we operate at the behest of the people and we provide a service, right? So for them, they're like, we think this is something that needs to happen to where the determination needs to be made that you had a cybersecurity incident, you need to seek help for it. And like I said, it's a 72-hour reporting requirement, right? So and this is for anybody operating or has any type of business in the state of New York, right? So in New York, we all know like everything's going to run through New York, right? Like New York City, especially, right? Like they're the mecca of the world, right? To let them tell it, right? I know you don't think that from Buffalo, Ryan, but New York,
Everything is about the city.
everything is about.
The rest of the state doesn't count.
Look, I'm from Maryland. Anytime I tell anybody that, they always assume Baltimore. It's the only.
Right. Like from the corner?
Yeah, yeah.
The Wire?
The Wire. I don't need to watch The Wire. I lived it. But no, so this is a good thing, right? So like I said, 72-hour requirement. And like I said, the federal government has tried to do this, and now New York State is on board with it to say, okay, this is how we want to do things, and they're actually making amendments to their laws that they have, right? So, good thing. How the how the employment of it is going to work, we'll see, right? Because they're coming up with things right now, like 100. They're saying it's a 180-day window right now from the date, which was November 1st, which is when they implemented this, for when they're saying people have to be in compliance. And it's kind of weird. So they give a date of November 1st, and then they say most changes will take effect in 180 days, or Monday, April 29th, 2024 is the date they give, right? So they're saying, okay, April 29th, 2024, this is when this has to be implemented, right? So there's other compliance dates for different transition periods, but there's different requirements that need to be met for that. But this is a good thing. I would like to see other states follow suit, because this is, again, this day and age that we live in, cybersecurity is what matters, right? Like this is where people are being the most affected, but they're paying the least attention, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So because we do everything online now, right? We use our phones, we use our computers to do all these different things. Again, the effect and the reach that this can have is far reaching. So Ryan, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. For 99% of it, I have my own little spin on it as well. But so I always forget, if you have not done so already, please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff that gets you to the top of the algorithm, gets to share with other people, gets us out there in more of a broader sense. So please do all the above, hit a bell. There's a bell involved. So I'm of two minds, right? And originally this was going to be the discussion behind the scenes, right? Because I thought this would be a pretty good one to volley back and forth, but we have a better one, so definitely tune in on Wednesday when we have a different discussion. Um, so as an assessor, right, of RMF frameworks, it it it's a good thing. I like that they're adding these stipulations and what have you. I think it just makes the broader um the broader protections for the customer are awesome. However, I don't want a New York's version. I don't want a Connecticut version. I don't want a Texas version. I think it's going to start to stack, and I think that's unfortunate. I think all this stuff should roll up to the bigger requirements. It should be a federal standard, which if in a perfect world, this will roll up, right? They'll be like, okay, New York, you added some good stuff. Now we all need to be compliant in the same sense. So like you have like the PCI DSS standard, right? So the payment card industry data security standard, PCI DSS, just rolled from 3.2.1 to 4.0. So we're doing a lot of telling customers like, hey, the new standard is about to go into effect. The way we do your pen testing will change, right? Depending on if you're in the what part of the network we're testing, right? Um, that's a good thing. It's evolving. However, I've noticed that with FedRAMP, you have FedRAMP, State Ramp, Texas Ramp. It just keeps going on, right? I don't want it to be 50 different standards where everyone gets a little piece of the pie, and then I have to figure out like, are you in this state? Do you service people in this state? Like, how does this impact you? Like, I mean, from a consulting standpoint, it's kind of cool because now I have more to talk about, right? Because a lot of customers won't be tracking. So it gives me the ability, like, not only to be a subject matter expert, but to have an interesting conversation with a client, which is always fun and interesting. But again, as an assessor of the framework, it makes it very complicated. I'm like, which one of these standards am I following? What little nuances do I have to follow? Um,
Or it could be multiple, right? Like you have a
right,
different
exactly.
multiple.
Like you're going to be impacted by New York, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. You know what I mean? So now it's just expanding the scope of my assessment. So it's interesting. I'm for it if it all rolls up into a bigger scheme, right? Like the federal government looks at this and says, okay, I like what New York's doing. I like what Texas is doing. And I need to put this into the bigger framework, into the bigger standard. Like my only worry will be if it's only piecemeal, right? Because I just don't like the way that like I'm not a lawyer. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to know I have to know 50 different intricate standards when there's a bigger one that they should all roll up into. So it's of two minds with it. Um, I think it's a good thing. I like that New York is doing it. Again, like you said, New York feels that they are at the center of the universe. I mean, they do have the stock exchange there, so they they everything does funnel through them, right? To a certain extent. But as a like you said from Buffalo, like they say I'm from South Canada, right? There's no respect from the city for the rest of the state. Like none of y'all exists, right? It's all about us down here in this very dense peninsula.
That's
Um,
not even the state capital, because so that's
right.
Albany, right? Albany's the state capital.
Yeah,
So,
that's
wow.
upstate.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's that's upstate, right? That's not real New York. If you're not from one of the boroughs or whatever, and then the Buffalo gets like we're West New York. No one respects us outside of that pocket, right? Griselda. Um, but to be honest with you, I do think like so right now, right? In 2023, I think this is a good idea, and I like that they're adding more to the standard to protect clients, customers, people in general. But 2024, 2025, Ryan might not be as excited because there'll be 5 and 10 and 15 different little nuances to the standard. So that kind of makes me a little worried. Hopefully this continues to be monitored and then rolled up so everybody has to face this new standard, which in this case, being a bigger state, it will, right? Like being that it is coming out of New York, a lot of people will have to succumb to it because a lot of people are doing business out of there. Same thing if you're like in the North Capital region, right? If someone down there, like a Maryland or a DC adopts a standard, we pretty much all adopt a standard, right? When it comes to Department of Defense or federal government. So there, in certain circumstances, I think it'll be okay if it's larger states that people do a lot of work out of. But then if you start to get like really, really, not to say that state is small, but like a lot of work is not being done out of there, like a Rhode Island for the sake of this argument. I'm like, I don't want that to be its own thing because like now I have to figure out if you're doing work or if you have clients or customers or if you're a merchant provider, a service provider out of Rhode Island somehow. if you touch that state, now I have to be worried about that little nuance. So we'll see what comes of it. I think it's a good idea now.
That's a good point that I didn't think about, right? And it's from your work experience that you come to that conclusion, you know what I mean? But yeah, you bring up a good point because like your less populated states, your Montanas, your Wyomings or whatever,
Yeah,
right? What is going through there that's not, I mean, oil related, right? Oil and gas maybe out of those,
right.
you know what I mean? But other than that, like it's not a major hub to be doing those types of things. But yeah, you man, that's a good point.
Yeah, so we'll see what the future holds, right? Again, like the podcast is timeless. All right, we'll come back here. We'll discuss this again because it's only going to keep evolving. All right, these standards are only getting to be bigger and hopefully better because of like we always talk about your colonial pipelines, your solar winds, your which we'll talk about later in the week. So definitely tune in for that. These big events that take place that cause people to take notice and then to worry and then create regulation and restrictions to hopefully stop from happening again in the future. But I digress, right? But yeah, definitely tune in throughout the rest of the week. Again, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Hit a bell if there's a bell involved. Trying to get our numbers back up. They're still really good, but we had this big pop. I want to do that again. So whatever happened to make that happen again, do it again, people. I liked it. All right. Those numbers were shooting up. But please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Hit up the podcast on all the socials that go by our name. You can meet me up personally. I'm at RY Security Guy. That's RY Security Guy. You can find me on LinkedIn, Clubhouse, Twitter, and Threads. Stay safe, stay secure.